Doing soil tests, I guess it's that time of year.
Well, it is, Rob. It's when things are a little bit quiet and you've got a little bit of time and for the agents to come and or yourself to sample your paddocks and know and look up your records and say which ones we've done. And most farmers will test their paddocks on a sort of once every 5 year rotation to look after things like the pH levels, liming, and looking at other nutrients that might be missing, phosphate. Perhaps the potash and the nitrogen are more a fix-up thing in the spring, like those elements are quite mobile and quite susceptible to soil temperature in terms of mineralisation and things like that. So they're perhaps a fix-up thing in the spring, but the basic foundation for the building or the foundation for the crop, your pH and your phosphate levels, are something that can be fixed up and need to be fixed up perhaps up to 6 months before you really want it to be hitting its peak and working for you.
There's a couple of wee things. Irrigation, for example, apparently locks up some things.
Yeah, it locks up some things and actually leaches others. So there's a bit of a disparity, and there's all sorts of things like sulfate of ammonia that you use as a nitrogen fertilizer are extremely acid, and so they can increase the demand or need for liming, which is alkaline and base, and so the base and the alkaline, what you use can affect how often you should be testing and putting things like lime on.
Well, you said 5 years, but do you reckon you should do it more often than that?
Depends how friendly your fertiliser company are. If they'll do those tests for nothing for you, if you're a good client or a big client, and yeah, they normally do. They're pretty good, really. But
because you can over fertilise, can't you, with phosphorus and that sort of thing?
Well, it's basically a waste, and I've seen it with lime. Guys will go out and put on 7 tonne per hectare. Well, it takes about a year to move your pH about 0.1 with about 1 tonne. So if you want to put a whole lot of $100 notes out in the paddock there for a few years and just not have them work for you, if your cash flow's that good and you want to hide some money, put on some capital fertiliser that's not working for you or not needed, basically.
Yeah, I don't think too many of them out there would actually be ready to waste money. But
no, so it tends to be sort of, yes, perhaps a little and often, and maybe that should flow into the soil testing as well.
The other thing, Dennis, I guess, is, and you'll be aware of this, is that different crops have different demands.
Oh, absolutely. Crops like radish, huge potash requirements. Things like wheat. An English specialist said to us, he talked about fresh phosphate, and I thought this is a bit different because we have phosphate locked up in the soil, which can be released by the addition of lime to make it available, and I wouldn't call that fresh phosphate. That's probably old phosphate.
It could be 70 years old, that phosphate.
Well, it could be. It could have been locked up there for a long time. But certainly this English specialist talked about fresh phosphate, and I listened to that intently, and with growing wheat, put on something like 300 kgs per hectare of superphosphate, and people have stopped using superphosphate because it's an old-fashioned, virtually 2 elements, a bit of sulphur and a bit of phosphate in it. It's not as sexy or exciting as some of the blends that are used out there now, which have seen as a sort of a one-hit wonder, boof. But certainly I believe I saw a very good response to that superphosphate, which was relatively cheap per hectare, and I think we've forgotten about it.
It's the old story. Go back to what your grandfather did. I mean, cleaning windows with vinegar or with methylated spirits rather than some fancy expensive stuff. Same sort of thing.
Well, the old boys used to drill their wheat with 100 weight of superphosphate per acre. Now that's the old terminology, but 100 weight per acre, which 100 weight's roughly 50 kilos. So that's about 250 kgs per hectare.
And they did all right.
They did well.
Indeed.